Now we're moving on to something new that we haven't done here before. So it's a very exciting part of our community sync. We are going to do this once a month. So I would like to welcome Matheus, Robin, Mike, and Krishna, Kathan as well. So gentlemen, if you could introduce yourself real quick. Our scope for this fireside chat today is really about how did you or your organization get into ML orchestration. What was your journey? What was the pain you had? And so we're going to talk a little bit about this, and we're going to talk about some comparisons about ML ops and ML orchestration, how those two things in the organizations relate. But I would love to welcome first the panel members, the fireside chat members. So please hand it over to Matheus. So maybe you want to introduce yourself real quick, and then Robin, Mike, and then Krishna. Don't have any audio, so if you're speaking, we don't hear anything, so you're probably gonna unmute. No, I don't think so. So let's go on to.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Awesome.
Hi everyone. My name is Matheus. I'm a machine learning engineer at Hurb. It's a Brazilian company. It's a tech travel company from Brazil. I'm from the machine learning team. I'm actually our sole ML ops engineer for now. We are right now trying to develop a stack of machine learning tools so that everyone on our team can use and facilitate the process of developing on end-to-end machine learning systems. And yeah, that's it. I'm with them for like 8 months now, I believe. And yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Matheus. Robin, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Ntropy.
Hey, so I'm an ML engineer with Ntropy. Our main product, or our only product you could say, is we give you more information on bank transactions. For example, on your bank statement, you might have different transactions and there's some kind of transaction string description. And what we do is figure out who like the merchant was and what kind of transaction it was. For example, maybe you bought fast food somewhere. And yeah, so that's our main product. And basically, maybe a couple months ago, we wanted to start using pipeline systems, and I suggested Airflow first, but a colleague wasn't into Airflow. He suggested trying something else. So yeah, that's when we tried Flyte.
Awesome, fantastic. Mike Zhong from Embark.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having us today. My name is Mike. I'm a software engineer at Embark Veterinary. So we are a direct-to-consumer dog DNA testing company. And basically, the customers will purchase swabs. They'll swab their dog's cheek, ship the swab to a lab somewhere. The lab will process the DNA, run it on a microarray chip, and then send us data in S3. And that's kind of where we take over. I've been with Embark for about 1.5 years now. And when I joined, Embark had, at the time, kind of brewed their own workflow platform and orchestration system using, SQS and SNS and some other, EC2 autoscaling, some more raw materials from AWS. And the team was much smaller at the time, so we were able to kind of manage the pipeline end to end. As the teams grow, as you kind of start to build up, kind of better scoping of the individual jobs in the workflow, it's no longer manageable for a small team to manage everything. So we look towards solutions that would allow multiple teams to own the jobs, iterate on the jobs, and kind of update their jobs independent of the whole pipeline. So when you have these very bespoke homemade systems, you need a deep understanding of everything in order to make these changes. And we also had a lot of these implicit dependencies where, everything was captured in side effects, whether they be database writes or S3 writes. And these side effects were not apparent from an interface level, right? So you could easily break downstream jobs unintentionally. We underwent this kind of trade analysis where we explored a bunch of tools. In my own personal background, I've used Nextflow heavily, so I advocated for that actually. But we ended up finding out that Flyte had a lot of really great features. Specifically, what we really liked was the strong typing of the input outputs. A lot of other tooling, your inputs are either a value or a file, and that's all they give you, right? And then everything gets wrapped around that. But Flyte's really strong typing and the ability to introduce custom types was something that we really enjoyed and something that we've really liked so far in our adoption. So we're currently moving our entire pipeline system over to it right now, and really enjoying the process.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. And Krishna from Infinome, is that the name?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for putting together this awesome product. Yeah. So at Infinome, what we're trying to do is we're a lean bioengineering team. So we do a lot of synthetic biology projects, and lots of our data is very similar, I think, to what Mike was referring to. It's NGS or next generation sequencing data, and we have at least 3 commonly used pipelines that we put these data through over and over again. And what we wanted to do, I've been only with Infinome for the past 4 months now, but what we wanted to do is increase our reproducibility. So in the future, if you wanted to go back and say, hey, how was the data treated? How were those outputs generated? We wanted to have some kind of trace back to how those data were generated. And as you probably know, with next generation sequencing data, these data go through a lot of different tasks, different software tools. So you need to make sure that all those versions match up perfectly. So having that legacy is really important for us, and also the scalability, because right now what we're trying to do is only run a few samples per week, but we envision that as we have more projects and as we generate more data, we need to have a system that scales up really well with the number of samples. And having Flyte as a Kubernetes first system, I think is perfect for this because we can scale up really well. So those problems, I think, so we did a little bit like Mike said, we played around with Nextflow. It was fine for some tasks, but I really like where Flyte's helping us right now. It's early days. I've only been using it for a month now, but at least one pipeline that we transferred over to Flyte seems to do really, really well with the very little refactoring of our code, which is perfect. So yeah, thanks again for putting this together.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is fantastic to have you here and work with Flyte. So I was wondering about where you or your team, were you clear about your requirements when you tested your first solutions, obviously, and then, or did this evolve over time what your requirements are? I mean, it's always an open-ended situation. You learn more. So what was your situation?
Are you asking me?
Anyone?
Oh, yeah, I can go first. Yeah, so it's kind of like an open-ended. I think I'm not a machine learning engineer, so I'm a data scientist. So I'm learning this as I'm. But if I had more experience, maybe I would have come up with requirements. But because I'm a data scientist and not a machine learning engineer, I had to figure out things while I'm still, trying to use these things. So that's been my experience. In my past, one of my previous jobs, we used Prefect. So that was kind of like a good experience, understanding how these orchestration workflows look like, software looks like. But other than that, I think it's the latter, where we had to come up with requirements as we are building these tools.
Interesting. And then Mike, Matheus, Robin, on your side, did you know when you started the journey with Flyte what you exactly wanted, or was it just kind of like a discovery process as you went along?
So for us, I guess when we started, what people were doing is they had their different scripts that they ran on data, or maybe they were training a model in notebooks and so on. So our goal was just making that more reproducible and observable and all that stuff. And yeah, these kind of pipeline systems are perfect for that, right? But other than that, we didn't have any hard requirements on the system itself. I think so for that, I guess Airflow would have also done the job, but you might as well use the nicer framework, right? That gives you more features. Like Flyte has a lot of cool features that we're using.
Awesome. Robin?
I can go next. Yeah, I think we had a good sense of the requirements at the start. And those requirements mostly came out of the challenges working with our homemade system. So over the years of developing and iterating on the homemade system, we had noticed some things that were very uncomfortable for us. So the kind of black box behavior of AWS's auto scaling, for instance, was something that we didn't really like. We found the scale in to be rather slow. It could take 5 to 15 minutes for a cluster that scaled out to several thousand instances to come back to zero, even when there was no signal for it to be that high. Not great, right? I think what really helped us here, and something that we really liked about Flyte, was the Kubernetes native system. And Kubernetes, of course, open source, has a very rich set of tooling. So we were able to leverage things like Prometheus and Grafana, whereas before we were forced to use CloudWatch, right, for everything AWS. One of the other things that we were considering was how can the existing engineering teams collaborate with the scientists, and what sort of level of engineering support would be required to transition scientific workflows that are oftentimes just bash scripts, right? Let's be real. What would be required to kind of bring these workflows that may not necessarily fit neatly into the Flyte definition language? How can we support them and bring them in? How can we write our own kind of user manuals internally so that people that are new to Flyte can kind of onboard quickly and kind of start writing their own workflows quickly? We found the process so far to be very nice. And then, of course, the kind of big requirement, and I think everyone's touched on this, is data reproducibility, data provenance, and data lineage. That was something that we think Flyte provided very well for us.
Awesome. Matheus, I'm not sure if you have any other points to that topic.
Yeah, I'll touch on them very quickly. It's just that our main requirements when we started working on Flyte and when we started developing our MLOps stack, our main requirements like, okay, we want an orchestration tool that we can like reproduce our code, like retrain. We already have like Airflow. We have a very other orchestration tools on our other teams, like on data engineering team uses Airflow a lot, but we noticed that it wasn't very suitable for machine learning projects. So we were focused on like searching for a tool that was very easy to use to adopt for machine learning engineers, for data scientists to start using it. So we tried a little bit of different tools. As I said, Prefect was a tool that we actually tried a little bit. Like we didn't actually put in production or not or something like that. We just tried a little bit of Prefect, Flyte, and other tools, and we noticed that Flyte was like had this very good balance between like being a very strong, a very powerful tool, and at the same time having a small learning curve for machine learning engineers.
Awesome, fantastic. So a question for the panel here. So if you would go back in time, maybe half a year or whatever, 6 months, 9 months, and you would have to do the process again. And what are the learnings? What would you do differently? Or another way to ask, what can you give as advice for people who are in a similar situation as you were maybe some time ago? What's advice that you want to give?
I can start. So when I started, there were a lot of different questions I had that I know I couldn't answer without just using Flyte, basically. So that's what I did. And now, yeah, a couple months later, I have answers for some of those questions. Like, for example, we're using a mono repo and we have different environments like staging and prod and so on. And there's a question about how to keep that in sync with the different Flyte environments, for example. So questions like these, I couldn't really answer before. So if I had to redo it, I would redo the same thing because there's no way to figure out those questions without us trying it, I guess.
Got it. Anything on I think I heard it earlier. I think somebody mentioned, I think it was you, Matheus, or potentially Mike, about the teams and getting the scientist side together with engineering side, and I think this is always a little bit of a struggle, when you have two teams working completely from two different ends, and is your advice to bring those teams together to begin with, or just roll out the platform, getting them used to? But what kind of steps would you recommend when you when you introduce a platform like Flyte in your organization?
That's a great question. So at Embark, we kind of started by bringing the two sides together. So we have a lot of kind of smaller teams that are, 2 engineers and 2 scientists. And we have a larger infrastructure team. And when we were kind of deciding on the tooling and settled on Flyte, we actually, we didn't consult the other teams too much because we kind of felt that everyone would kind of bring their own opinions to the table. And more importantly, everyone would kind of bring their past experiences to the table, meaning somebody that had, for instance, worked at the Broad Institute and used Cromwell for a number of years would say, hey, we should use Cromwell because of X, Y, Z. And that's kind of why we did the trade analysis, right? We kind of wanted to be objective about what we wanted to achieve and what we wanted to accomplish. So sure, we asked the other teams, what do you need from this platform? But at the same time, we didn't say, well, what do you think would be a good solution, right? We kind of decided to be opinionated about that. To your original question about what would we have done differently, I think the only thing we would have done differently is get involved with the Flyte community a little earlier. We went through the documentation very early on and started learning about Flyte, but we didn't immediately join the Slack channel. We didn't immediately start asking the Flyte team some of the questions. We tried to answer them on our own, and sometimes it was fruitful. Sometimes we were able to do it. But I think some of the best learning that we had was when we actually interacted with the team, when we were very open about our questions and about our lack of understanding. We found that the response times were great. All the documentation that they linked us to, was accurate, up to date. And so that's probably something I would give advice for anybody else is if you're considering adopting Flyte and you're working on a POC, for instance, introduce yourself to the community, ask any questions that you have, because I think you'll find people are very willing to help you out.
Awesome. We also have Keithan, CEO of Union AI here. So Keithan, I wanted to ask you, community. So tell us a little bit about the office hours and all the stuff that we're doing, and then how do we engage with the community?
Yeah. Firstly, thank you everybody for joining, and Mike, absolutely, completely agree. We have, when you're working in an open source project, and we treat Flyte with the most open, like the highest level of open source sanct space that it is. We treat it with that level of respect, and you'll never see us cross-selling any of our other things. So it's very important. It's very hard for us to know who's using us. I remember when Mike and we got introduced, we had no idea that Embark was even using Flyte, to be honest. And even today, I every day learn about new companies using us. And sometimes I even learn about companies who are using us went through a little bit of a struggle. And it's too late now because they've actually gone over the hurdle. And I'm sure there are some other companies who are trying to use, probably give up. They're like, oh yeah, I didn't find this one doc and give up. The only thing I would say is that there's no excuse for not having good documentation, and we try our best, and we are trying to do whatever we can to improve it. Community help will absolutely help us improve it. But that's why we have a Slack channel, and we try to keep really, a helpful presence over there. And not only us, I think other community members from different companies are within the Slack channel. So please join it and ask questions. Sometimes we respect that you take like weeks to bang your head on a problem, but sometimes it's probably just better to ask. It's okay. No question is too small. No question is too out of the woods, as long as it pertains to Flyte. Please ask it. And to that effect, we actually I think about 4 months ago or something, we started doing office hours 3 times on Wednesday. It's mornings, afternoons, and evenings in Pacific time. And we've seen a lot of people come in and join and ask questions, and you'll find us absolutely. And some people actually just come in and ask us questions, just in general about like, what's happening in machine learning and what do you think about it? And all of those are okay. Like we love to meet community members. We love to know who's using us. And we would love to hear more. We would love to hear what you would like in the system. What do you think is missing? Because there's just no way within this community to come up with a consensus otherwise, like unless people speak up. And thank you, Martin, for doing this and getting more people involved today, and asking them to voice their opinions. This is not the only reason why you should voice your opinions. Feel free and just talk in the Slack channel even, or this community sync every other week that we have. Definitely come up and say, like for example, the other day somebody was saying, we want to use MLflow for tracking. And I know Matheus or somebody else has done this work. And I'm like, I know there are people who are doing this, but I don't know how to connect you. So if you come to the community, I'm sure you will automatically enhance somebody else's experience. So please, voice what you would like. If there are I think there's another team, Arctic Wolf, they asked about SageMaker, and then immediately some other company folks jumped on it and said like, hey, we also would like this. And this is how it works. With Spotify, they talked about Ray and I think Shopify and like ByteDance and 4 other companies jumped on it. And it's just like, and now all of it is happening. These companies are working together. So we need, this is why community exists, literally. And so please use it. And I think help us spread it too, like help us spread the word, get more people on it. If you can write a blog or something, that really, really, really helps the community. So thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think thanks a lot, Keith. And I feel like that's important too. I think Mike, you absolutely nailed it. I think engaging sooner is really the key. Office hours are a great tool here. I wanted to actually ask one more question, and then we have probably 5 more minutes or so to go over that. And that is for Krishna. And I think you're coming from the research, from the data science side, and so do I. I mean, I'm a data scientist. I'm not an engineer. And I was always interested when data scientists work on their research demos, and then we go and talk to our ML engineers, and we figure out how do we get this thing to the point where actually we can learn what it does in the inference and so on in production. So maybe you have a unique view about your experience here, and maybe unique advice about how to engage with ML engineers specifically when it comes to orchestration topics.
Yeah. One thing that I found sticky with even Prefect back in the day when I was using Prefect was, the seamless translation between dev environments to production environments, right? So that I think is sometimes lost in that whenever, the data scientists talk with machine learning engineers, you want something that obviously eases the burden on the data scientists to develop things without being overburdened by extra things that they need to do to get things to production. I think that's the key. And with Flyte, surprisingly, I wasn't hoping this would happen, but it was actually very, I wouldn't say completely seamless, but surprisingly less onerous than what I thought it would be. So that was awesome. So that's, I think, one thing that I think people go in naively into these meetings, assuming, data scientists and machine learning engineers talk the same language, but we come from dev, right? We like developing things, and I'm assuming machine learning engineers like things in production, right? So yeah, so that I think needs to be more clear, more explicitly communicated. Yeah.
Awesome, fantastic. All right, any other? I just want to open up one more time. Mike, Matheus, Robin, any comments?
I have a thing to suggest.
Oh,
so I don't know if you, hello folks. As very new to Flyte, sometimes I think probably if you have smaller videos, walkthroughs, as in this is how this should be done, kind of setting a tone to this is the best practice to approach this. And probably this could come from a lot of folks who have already gone through this. You have gone through the pain of figuring out, oh, we probably should have done this in this manner rather than that. So if collaboratively something could be triaged, and if smaller videos could be made, so that can fast track adoption of Flyte. And just like I believe someone here was mentioning that they tried trying out things on their own, and then later on getting connected with the community was helpful. So it could be hard for people to sometimes come and ask, because they might think, I have not gone over all the documentation. If I just come out and ask, I might just seem less sincere of what I should have done. So coming from there, I would say if you have some videos of walking people through, that could be helpful, just as an idea throwing out.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that we feel like would be super helpful. Also, Medium posts, walk through some examples, links to YouTube or whatever you're going to use there. I felt like this is kind of like how we learned the first stage. And I feel like exactly where you're coming from is like, you don't want to actually bother somebody, and you want to do your homework first, and you don't want to get the response of, hey, have you looked there? And you're like, oh, I could have found this, right? So I completely get you. And so it's up to us to produce those videos and documentation, as Keithan said earlier. I think there's an area where we have to improve. I think there's no doubt about this, but I think really spreading, even if you think it's not that important, everybody knows that. I think the rule is don't assume that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I will definitely say, so we've added a few videos, and what we did is all of these meetings that we do, if small snippets from there, we take it and we try to put it in various parts of the docs. You probably have seen those. One thing we would love, if I think knowing the problems is also, this is the, I talked to all four of you. You've now been using Flyte for a little bit. You've probably forgotten the initial pain points of like, where are these crazy, package and then register and like blah, blah, blah. It's crazy, right? Like, we would love for you to, if you could remember, if you're early in that journey, if there is that pain, that friction log, share it with us, share it with the community, because that friction log is golden, right? It only happens once, and at the end of it, you either are with the community or we have lost already. So if you have that, I know sometimes it's a lot of work, but if you have even few points in there, please share. It will help us improve, and I promise that we will improve, because that's what we've done over the last 1.5 years. We've constantly improved, and we want to do more of that. So.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Thanks. Go ahead.
Pain-driven development is a very powerful thing. So you can either internalize the pain or like let it go into the ether of Slack, and someone will pick it up.
Yeah, give it on Slack. It's fine.
It's gonna work. Okay, cool, awesome. So I think we have a few more things. So I just want to say, encourage you to continue this conversation on Slack. Absolutely, right. Bring people in that might be interested in Flyte, and have them engage with us. I think that's really fantastic.